They don't attack you because you're weak. They attack you because you look like you won't fight back. Have you ever watched someone vanish without warning? Slipping into the background like smoke, only to have the very people who once ignored them whisper their name with newfound reverence? It wasn't raw power that conjured their presence, it was their disappearance. They stopped leaking pain. They stopped justifying themselves. They withdrew the pieces of their soul that no one ever bothered to protect. In a world where truth rarely defines your worth, exposing your wounds only hands others a knife. It can be drowning inside. Loyal, sincere yet, if the world glimpses your fractures, they don't extend a hand. They sharpen the blade. That's the silent rule no one prepares you for. You don't need to be unbreakable. You need to be unreadable. The moment someone can predict your pain, they'll exploit it not out of malice, but because weakness invites leverage. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. He didn't write to console the broken. He wrote to teach them how to vanish and return as something untouchable. Being untouchable isn't about cruelty, it's containment. It's not heartlessness, but strategic reserve. It's not coldness, but a stillness colder than steel. The untouchable don't beg for attention. They send signals. They move in silent purpose. They observe with unerring precision. They don't plead to be seen, because their absence resonates louder than their presence ever could. So, if you've been dismissed, misread, underestimated, consider this more than a monologue, it's your manual. Are you ready to step into the shadows, where power isn't proclaimed, but felt the moment you enter the room? If so, don't speak, just stay. From this moment on, we don't explain our pain. We fashion it into armor. You weren't born for Jill. We're trained to bleed in public and told that bleeding made you noble. They said if you bared your heart, they'd protect it. If you endured long enough, they'd recognize your worth. If you gave more, they'd finally love you right. What happened? You revealed your fears. You confessed your confusion. You stayed even when it broke you, and they used every soft part of you against you. You became readable, reachable, manipulatable. In a world ruled not by poetry, but by power, honesty wasn't honored. It was punished. Here's the truth. No one ever told you. They don't destroy you by accident. They destroy you because you showed them where to aim. You shrank yourself. You apologized for existing. You tried to become smaller, softer, easier to love, hoping someone would notice. But they didn't notice. They adjusted. They learned that your silence wasn't strength. It was surrender. They learned that your kindness wasn't a boundary. It was access. And each time you called it love, what you were really saying was, I'll keep bleeding if it means you'll stay. That silent pain you carry, the one you've never spoken aloud, isn't a sign of weakness. It's the scar left behind by being open in a world that feeds on the open-hearted. You tried to heal, you tried to piece yourself back together in quiet moments, one thread at a time. But each time you began to stitch your wounds shut, someone came along and tore them open again. The most haunting part, you let them. Why? Because you confused pain with purpose. You mistook survival for loyalty. You believed your suffering proved your goodness. But here's the truth. Being good in the wrong environment is the fastest route to being broken beyond recognition, because the world doesn't always honor depth. Most people don't value how deeply you feel. They value how icily they can bend those feelings to serve their own comfort. Let that sink in. Sit with it. Because until you confront that quiet, buried, bleeding truth, you'll keep handing knives to people who smile while you bleed, and they won't stop. Not because they hate you, but because they know they can. That's the unspoken dynamic. The real question isn't, why do they keep doing this to me? It's why do I keep offering myself up as a target? That's the pain no one talks about, not just the wound itself, but the repetition, the pattern. The cycle of trusting hands that were never taught how to hold, only how to take. And from that pain, a decision must be made. A shift. A reckoning. You can continue performing softness for a world that weaponizes your tenderness. Or you can vanish from the stage they built for you, tear down their script, and begin building a version of yourself that no one can ever touch again. Why do they hurt you when you finally open up? Why do they retreat the moment you let your guard down? Why does vulnerability, something sacred, something innately human, so often become the very reason they turn away? Here's the answer. No one dares to speak. We don't live in a world that protects emotional truth. We live in a world that profits from exposing it. From the moment you learn to speak, they told you to express yourself, to be authentic, to speak your truth. But what they never taught you was how to protect that truth once it was out in the open. You learned to share your dreams, and they learned how to laugh at them. You revealed your fears, and they learned exactly where to press. You believed that honesty would bring you closer to others, but they used your honesty to keep you beneath them. And over time, the most dangerous belief took root: that love is tied to pain. That kindness requires you to bend until you disappear. That true strength is staying silent while your spirit fractures. But this isn't your fault. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are trapped inside a psychological system that rewards control and punishes openness. Let's not pretend. Every space you walk into, family, career, relationships, friendship, carries its own invisible structure of power. And in that structure, your feelings don't define your status. It's not how deeply you feel. It's how freely you reveal those feelings that marks you. Your emotional availability becomes currency. Every time you overshare, over-explain, or over-apologize, you send a silent but powerful message: I am accessible. I am readable. I can be decoded, manipulated, used, and what is fully accessible rarely feels valuable. That's not cruelty, it's psychology. People don't chase what they already have. They chase mystery. They crave challenge. They desire what stays just beyond their reach. The harder something is to possess, the more precious it seems. And you handed over your heart, fully intact, open, vulnerable, and unguarded. But instead of protecting it, they poked at it. They tested it like a boundaryless experiment, wondering, how far can I go before they finally break? Because in that power dynamic, testing your limits gives them control. Watching you stay despite the pain gives them leverage. Your honesty, your rawness, your openness, it becomes a manual. Your emotional truth becomes a map. And once they hold the map, it's not hard to find the buttons. The more they understand what scares you, what drives you, what wounds you, the easier it is to steer you, not through violence, but through subtle, it's invisible control. This is the deeper mechanism Machiavelli saw long before we had language for. Emotional intelligence or social algorithms, he wrote. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. Because in this world, people don't judge your truth, they judge your visibility. They don't evaluate your reality, they evaluate your presentation. If you cry, they don't see pain. They see weakness. If you explain, they don't hear clarity. They hear surrender. If you remain available, they don't feel lucky. They feel entitled. So what's the answer? How do you survive that kind of system without hardening into something cold and bitter? You stop narrating your suffering. You stop gifting people the map to your most sacred emotional truths. It's not about silencing your heart. It's about guarding it. It's not about becoming fake. It's about becoming precise, controlled. Sovereign, it means mastering the art of presence without overexposure, showing strength without asking to be seen. It means becoming like a storm, not loud or chaotic, but felt, powerful, undeniable, and impossible to predict. Because unpredictability isn't danger, it's protection. It's sovereignty. And that's why this channel exists. Not to entertain you, not to soothe you, but to arm you, to turn pain into power, to sharpen your silence into strategy, to show you what no one else ever bothered to teach, that when you become unreadable, you become untouchable. If this message hit something deep in you, if it made the invisible visible, support this mission. A simple gesture like a share, a comment helps us create more content like this, cinematic, tactical, and unflinchingly real. Share this with someone still bleeding in front of people who keep sharpening their knives, because this isn't content. It's armor. And now that you've seen the system, in the next part, we'll dive into the traps, the habits that keep you chained to it. Because no matter how wise you become, no matter how much insight you gather, if you keep repeating the wrong patterns, you'll stay in the hands of people who never deserved to touch you in the first place. Let's stop pretending you landed here by accident. You didn't stumble into this cycle. You were trained systematically, repeatedly, to confuse self-abandonment with love. For kindness, they called it love. They called it maturity. They called it being the bigger person. But in truth, it was programming. A subtle script buried in you since the beginning, one that taught you to equate pain with nobility, to confuse silence with strength, and to wear endurance like a badge of honor. And that script, it kept you powerless. Let's break the spell. Mistake number 1, believing that love can heal dysfunction. You were raised on stories that said, if you love hard enough, they'll change. You believed your love had the power to fix what was broken in someone else. But love cannot save a person who is unwilling to look in the mirror. Compassion does not rewrite patterns. Patience does not undo chaos. The harder you loved, the more they took without giving. The more you stayed, the less they had to show. Up. Love without limits doesn't heal dysfunction, it feeds it. It gives it space to thrive, unchecked and unchallenged. Mistake number 2, over-explaining your worth. You've spent nights crafting perfect messages, essays disguised as texts, pleading to be understood. You shared your intentions in hopes that clarity would earn you care. But here's the brutal truth. If someone truly wanted to understand, you wouldn't have to explain yourself. Machiavelli said it best. He who explains too much reveals his weakness. Explanation, when forced, starts to sound like begging and desperation. It's not honored. Dated, studied, then weaponized. Mistake. Number 3, waiting for closure from the one who caused the wound. You leave the door cracked open, just in case. Maybe they'll come back with clarity. Maybe they'll finally apologize. Maybe they'll understand what they did. Closure isn't something they give, it's something you choose. It's not a gift, it's a decision. It's a door you bolt shut from the inside. The untouchable don't wait to be rescued. They rescue themselves. They don't chase apologies, they become their own ending. Mistake number 4, confusing presence with peace. You tell yourself at least they're still here. Proximity isn't proof of love. Sometimes it's dependency. It's manipulation disguised as intimacy. A person can be inches away from you and still be 1,000 miles from protecting your heart. Even parasites stay close. They have to survive. Don't confuse attachment with safety. Just because they're present doesn't mean you're protected. Mistake number 5, making excuses for disrespect. They were just tired. They didn't mean it. They had a rough day. You bend yourself backward to maintain the illusion. But every excuse you make becomes permission. Every justification becomes authorization. And over time, you shrink not because they ask you to, but because you believe you must, just to keep the peace. But peace that costs your dignity is not peace. It's quiet surrender. Mistake number 6, thinking emotional honesty is always a strength. You were told, be real, be raw, speak your truth. And yes, honesty is powerful, but only when it's given to someone capable of holding it gently. When you give your unfiltered pain to someone careless, you don't look courageous. You look exposed, and they now know exactly where to strike. Truth is sacred, but sacred things must be protected now. Pause, breathe, because maybe right now you're realizing something painful. These weren't just isolated mistakes. They were patterns, reflexes, deeply learned behaviors passed off as virtues. And even worse, they were praised. You were applauded for enduring what should have broken you, celebrated for staying in places you should have left, admired for bleeding quietly instead of walking away boldly. But none of that was power, it was survival. And survival isn't the same as strength, it's what you do when you've been trained to tolerate pain, to normalize suffering, and to call it love. And survival mode is not where you're meant to stay. It's where you began, but not where you belong. Here's your awakening. You weren't weak. You were conditioned. You were taught to be readable, molded to be agreeable, and praised. for being endlessly accessible. You were shaped to be manageable so you would never evolve into the one thing that threatens control the most. Someone who is unreachable, unpredictable, untouchable. They trained you to stay small so you'd never intimidate. But now, that ends. In the next part, we shift the ground completely. This is no longer about dissecting your mistakes. This is about illuminating the truth that was deliberately kept from you. The truth that could have changed how you see the world, how you lead your life, and how you protect yourself forever. Because the untouchable don't just recover, they transform with strategy. They evolve with ruthless clarity. Clarity so sharp, it cuts off compromise before it begins. You were taught that life was about being liked, that kindness would always return to you in kind. You're at that, if you respected others, they'd naturally return the favor. But Machiavelli, he saw something else. He stripped the world of illusions and looked at it raw, without filters. What he discovered wasn't soft or sentimental, but it was unshakably real. It is much safer to be feared than loved, he wrote. It's not because fear is cruel, but because love is fragile. Love is vulnerable. Love depends on emotions and memory. Mood and moment, it can vanish as quickly as it blooms. Fades, it forgets. But fear is focused. Fear pays attention. Fear honors your boundaries. Even when people dislike you, fear makes them cautious. This is the truth most avoid. Being loved is optional. Being respected is not. When people love you without limits, they grow careless. They test how far they can go. They assume you'll stay, no matter how many lines they cross. But when people fear disappointing, you truly fear it, they hesitate. They pause before they speak. They weigh their words. They measure their actions. Because now, there's a cost. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's not about becoming a tyrant. It's about refusing to play the fool one more time. You've seen it, you've lived it. You've treated them well, and they took advantage. You gave endlessly, and they calculated how much more they could extract. You forgave too fast, and they stopped even pretending to hide their betrayal, because they knew you'd still stay. They follow incentive. They aren't loyal to your goodness.
Yes.
They're loyal to the benefit they gain from you.
At.
Why to truth, but to the access they have through you. In the moment you project softness without edge, they stop seeing a person and start seeing an opportunity. But everything shifts radically when your presence carries weight, when your silence unsettles. When your gaze speaks, I don't chase, I choose. That's when the game changes. It's when they stop treating you like an option. Because now, you've become a consequence. This is the essence of the untouchable mindset. You don't lean on goodness. You lean on leverage. You don't depend on fairness. You prepare for betrayal. You don't ask to be respected. You build. A presence so undeniable that disrespect feels dangerous. Because here's the truth. No one wants to admit, but you must never forget, people will use you until they fear losing you. They will keep pushing your ... limits. Everyone has them. But many won't respect yours until your limits push back. They will ignore your voice until your silence becomes louder than your words, until your absence rewrites the comfort they took for granted. See, Machiavelli didn't write for the brokenhearted. And not just kings and thrones or leaders in palaces, but for anyone who chooses never to be ruled by emotional debt. Whether or not you wear a crown, the truth is, you are under siege. Not always by armies, but by energy drainers, by people who crave your presence, your time, your attention, yet offer nothing in return, by systems that reward obedience, yet mock sincerity, by relationships that demand your loyalty, yet dismiss your pain. This is the war you were never warned about. And if peace is your goal, you'd better prepare for battle. If you want loyalty, don't plead for it, build leverage. If you want to be remembered, stop explaining, start commanding. This isn't cruelty, strategy. You still have a heart, but now you no longer place it in hands that squeeze instead of hold.
Ow, ow.
You still feel deeply, but you don't hand them the map to your wounds. You still love, but this love comes with terms, not desperation. You were taught to be an open book, to be transparent, honest, legible, but the untouchable. They move like locked vaults, not because they have something to hide, but because they understand this. Power resides in what you withhold, not in what you reveal. That's where the shift begins. Not with your words, but your posture. Not with trying to be understood, but with becoming untouchable. You've spent a lifetime trying to be enough. You quieted your voice so others wouldn't feel insecure. You forgave too fast so they wouldn't walk away. You softened your edges, made yourself accessible, easy to digest, hoping someone, anyone, would finally stay. But where did it leave? You, empty, resentful, drained, not because you were too emotional, because you handed your power to people who never deserved to hold it. And here's the cruel irony: they didn't change. You did. You traded your backbone for harmony, your fire for comfort, your clarity for the delusion that maybe they'll understand you one day. And in that slow exchange, you became forgettable, useful, expendable. But now you see it. Once your eyes are opened, there's no going back. This is the moment where everything breaks. Not because life is falling apart, but because the false version of you is dying. The version that sought permission, it begged to be seen. That believed being liked was the same as being respected. That version ends here. This is the shift. From I hope they understand me, to if they don't respect my silence, they don't deserve my voice. From I don't want to lose them to I refuse to lose myself. From let me explain to let me disappear. You start speaking less and moving with more weight. You stop proving your worth and let your boundaries speak for you. Stop waiting for closure and create it with your absence. You no longer beg for clarity because now your standards are the clarity. This isn't numbness. It's discipline. It's not bitterness. Strategy. It's the realization that your heart is powerful, but only when it's protected. It's understanding when that heart has become a liability and choosing, with fierce intention, to guard it like kingdom it truly is. Because the truth, no one ever told you the truth that was buried beneath layers of silence and survival is this. Your empathy is not weakness. Your openness is not a flaw. Your love is not a liability. These are rare powers. But when placed in the wrong hands, they turn from gifts into weapons. What once made you radiant becomes bait. What once empowered you becomes the blueprint for your undoing. You begin explaining your pain to the very people who caused it, as if clarity could cure cruelty. You find yourself trusting those who only study your heart long enough to discover its weakest door. And worst of all, you keep loving people who see your light not as something to cherish, but something to dim, to control, to step over so they can shine. And then you ask the haunting question, why does this keep happening to me? But the better question, the braver one, is this. Why do I keep offering myself where protection has never lived? This is where the untouchable mindset emerges. It's not just a shift in vocabulary. It's a transformation in vision.
How you
begin to see clearly. You stop calling chaos chemistry. You stop mistaking inconsistency for mystery. You no longer confuse apologies with action. And you no longer fear being misunderstood because you've realized, I don't need to be seen by everyone. I only need to be respected by the right ones. This shift is not a motivational quote. What is a death and a rebirth? It is the cremation of the self that begged to be chosen, and the rise of a version of you that chooses itself. What remains is sovereign, quiet, measured, unapologetic. You speak less but with more weight. You pause longer but with more presence. You begin enforcing your truth quietly, without fanfare. And when you return, you don't explain. You don't beg for understanding. You return without apology, because power doesn't ask for permission. And no, this isn't for everyone. Most won't understand your silence. They'll say you've changed. They'll whisper you've grown cold. And they'll be right. Because once you make this shift, you stop needing to be liked hand. You start becoming undeniable philosophy. By itself means nothing if it doesn't reshape how you move. You can study strategy. You can quote power all day. You can post insights, theories, and affirmations. But if your actions still scream accessibility, the world will continue treating you like something common, like something cheap. The world does not reward good intentions. It rewards execution, clarity, control. So let's make this shift real. Not in theory and movement. 1. Control access like a fortress. Ask yourself, who gets to reach me now? Because access is leverage. And when you're too reachable, people learn how to study you, how to push your buttons, how to drain you. So here's your new rule. You are no longer available. No more instant replies. There's no more long explanations. There's no more soft-spoken justifications in the name of kindness. Delay, decline, disappear strategically. Mystery is power, and power, by nature, is quiet. 2. Master the timing of your presence. Powerful people don't just enter rooms, they arrive. They don't speak to be heard, they shift the entire atmosphere. So from now on, every entrance is intentional. Move with calm, with stillness, in your eyes, with words that are few but unforgettable. And when you leave, don't leave noise, leave silence. A silence that lingers. A silence that makes them wonder what you didn't say. Because presence isn't about volume, it's about impact. 3. Speak like a sword, not a river. Your voice is a weapon, not a diary. You no longer owe anyone an explanation for your distance, your silence, your boundaries. Say less. Say sharper. Drop the "I'm sorry, but," and say no with full stop authority. No is a sentence. Use it, because this is the foundation. The untouchable don't just heal, they become unshakable. And that begins by remembering this truth. Your life is your fortress. Your presence is your currency. Your silence is your shield. Guard them wisely. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Let tension settle into the air like a storm cloud waiting to break. It's how power breathes quietly, but undeniably. This is not about making noise. It's about commanding the space without needing to speak. 4. Respond with precision, not emotion. They want you impulsive, reactive, caught in the moment, because emotion hands them control and not your own. But power doesn't live in instant reactions. It lives in stillness, in calculation. So never respond immediately. Pause, process, plot. You're not here to win petty arguments. You're here to control the narrative, to secure positioning. Let them fidget in the discomfort of your silence. Let them drown in the noise they created. Then respond, but only when your words have sharpened into weapons. 5. Become a mirror. They can't read. Most people overshare. They mistake exposure for connection, confusing openness with trust. But here lies the Machiavellian truth. The more they know, the less they fear. Transparency isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender. So reveal only what serves your strategy. Keep your movements veiled. Let them guess your next step. Let them question your intentions. Let them wonder where your strength originates. Show your results, never your process. Show the crown, not the blueprint. Be the mystery they can't decode. Power is more unsettling when it isn't explained. 6. Use absence as a weapon. You want them to feel your presence? Then leave. No farewell speech, no emotional exit, just vanish. Cut the signal, cut the access, cut the comfort they once took for granted, because absence isn't rejection. It's the strategic repositioning of your value. Silence rearranges power in ways noise never can. You're no longer available, they'll orbit around a version of you they can't predict, can't manipulate, and can't reach. These aren't games. They're boundaries. Not manipulation, but discipline. This is your armor, your strategy. Because when you begin to move like this, you stop performing for acceptance. You stop bleeding on command. You stop being the easy target. And you start becoming untouchable. In the next part, we unveil the full transformation, because this is more than silence, more than calculated tactics. It's about presence, the kind that changes the temperature of a room before you. Even speak. You used to be the one who felt too deeply, who waited too long, who gave too much. You over-explained your absence, overstayed your welcome, overloved without reciprocity. And what did it bring you? Ignored, exploited, forgotten. Then something inside you cracked. Only this time it didn't shatter, it reformed. You stopped chasing closure and started creating it. You stopped pleading to be noticed and began disappearing on purpose. And strangely, in your absence, they felt you more than they ever did. When you were present, you no longer begged to be valued. Now your mere presence makes the room adjust. Without a word, they sit straighter. They speak softer. This is the new face of power. It doesn't yell. It doesn't defend itself. It walks in silently and makes others watch their tone, not because you demanded respect, but because they instinctively understand the cost of disrespect. You no longer send the second text. You no longer explain the distance. Fix what you didn't break. Your gaze is cooler now, but sharper. Your presence is calmer, but heavier. And your love, it still exists, but it no longer begs for a home. You give it where it's earned, not where it's expected. You've stopped leaking energy. You've stopped negotiating your value. And just like that, you've become untouchable. You've stopped asking for space because now you are the space itself. You don't raise your voice anymore. Instead, you raise your standards. You don't play their game, you become the entire board. Once they knew exactly how to touch your buttons, how to push your limits, but now they hesitate. They second guess if they should even speak your name aloud because there's a tangible friction in the air around you. That friction isn't just tension, it's resistance. It means you are no longer easy to move, no longer emotionally accessible, no longer predictable. The untouchable don't just look different, they feel different. There is weight behind your silence, a finality behind every deliberate pause, and an unmistakable precision behind your presence. You don't rush to respond because you're not performing for anyone. You're calculating, observing, ruling, without ever needing to sit on a throne or make an announcement. This version of you doesn't ask, "Was I too much?" It declares firmly, "If I was too much for you, then you were never enough for me." You no longer compete for attention. You don't fight for loyalty. You don't chase after understanding because finally you have understood yourself. You have become untouchable not because no one can reach you, but because no one can shake you. You carry calm like a sharp blade. You wear distance like armor. And you let silence do what noise never could. Have you noticed how the strongest power rarely shouts? It moves quietly, confidently, without needing validation. You've stopped playing soft just to make others feel strong. Now others lower their tone just to maintain their access to you. This is the new face of power. It wears no crown. It holds no sword. But it rules completely and quietly, without ever needing to be loud or flashy. You no longer owe this world softness. You've bled in front of people who only learned how to cut deeper. You explained yourself to those who never truly listened. They only waited for their turn to respond. You waited for closure from people who were already celebrating your silence. But that ends here. You're not rebuilding the old you. You're burying it. No more apologies for having standards. No more guilt for being distant. No more shame for outgrowing those who made you feel small, just so you would stay near. Because the version of you that waited, that chased, that hoped she's gone, you've earned this new version of yourself. The version that walks away without announcing it. The version that cuts ties without explanation. The version that loves in silence and leaves with strategy. You no longer ask to be seen, because now your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. Let them wonder. Let them scroll endlessly through the unread messages. Let them reread your last words. Let them replay your silence like it's a haunting melody they can't escape. Because the untouchable don't chase, they don't explain, they don't return. They become the closure. So say it now. Say it like a vow, like a blade sliding perfectly into place. Say it for the version of you who stayed too long, who gave too much and finally let go. From this moment forward, I am unreadable. I am unbreakable. I'm unavailable to anyone who seeks to test my limits. I don't chase. I don't beg. I don't flinch. I become untouchable. Let that truth settle deep in your chest. Let it burn the old wounds clean, like fire cleansing the remnants of past weakness. Then rise, calculated, undefeated. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You don't even need to be remembered. You need only one thing: to never be weakened by the same thing twice. And from now on, no one gets close enough to try. You've made it here. You stayed through? All of it. You already know this wasn't just a lesson, it was a line in the sand. A boundary drawn sharply, irrevocably. Because the moment you become untouchable, you stop living on borrowed peace. You stop asking to be respected. Instead, you start moving in silence, so sharp that they feel it before you even speak. Being untouchable isn't about isolation or coldness. It's about inner clarity. It's about knowing exactly who you are, what you tolerate, and where your threshold ends. It's about making your presence felt without ever needing to perform, explain yourself. It's about becoming the one they can't predict, can't provoke, can no longer play with or manipulate. Do you see the power in that? You don't have to prove you've changed. You will feel it. Not in your words, but in your absence. You don't need to slam the door with noise or drama. Simply walk away and silence locks it for you. So take this version of yourself, the one that no longer flinches, no longer explains, no longer breaks sand. Carry it with you into every conversation, every room, every decision from this moment forward. Because true power doesn't shout. It watches. It waits. It rules quietly, undeniably. We'll meet again in the next lesson. I never wanted you to learn this. But when you do, you won't just be watching anymore, we'll be building. Until then, stay calm, stay unreadable, stay untouchable.